Hey, garden nerds, we have a sponsor for this episode. It's the Heirloom Roses Company. Looking to create timeless beauty in your garden? It's always a great idea to add roses. At Heirloom Roses, they know that the best roses start with the best roots, which is why they only hand propagate own root roses. These own root roses will outlive and outshine grafted roses from the big box stores, resulting in stronger disease resistance, a longer lifespan, and stunning blooms that are always true to variety. Located in Oregon, Heirloom Roses is a family owned business that grows over 900 varieties of roses for gardening zones 3 through 10. Use their great search tool to narrow down your choices based on zone, fragrance, growth habit, color, and more. Plus, they have a 1-year guarantee. So if your rose doesn't thrive in its first year, they will replace it for free. And as a special offer to our listeners, Heirloom Roses is offering 20% off all roses with the code NERD20. That's NERD20. Use this code at checkout now through October 31st, 2024. And since they ship year-round, you can choose the perfect ship date for your garden. It's time to experience growing roses the way nature intended, on their own roots. So visit them at heirloomroses.com and find your next rose today. And take 20% off with code NERD20. Now, on with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Gardenerd Tip of the Week podcast, where experts from around the world talk shop, share stories, and offer their favorite tip. I'm your host, Christy Wilhelmi. My guests this week are well known in the Pacific Northwest for flower gardening and a unique invention. Sean and Allison McManus are co-founders of Spoken Garden, where they share gardening skills and knowledge through their YouTube videos and their podcast, DIY Garden Minute. They've also authored a book together. It's called First Time Gardener Growing Plants and Flowers. Welcome to the podcast, you two.
Hi, Christy. Thanks for having us. We're so excited to be here.
And I am too. We know each other through the Garden Communicators International. We finally met in person at the Northwest Flower and Garden Festival a couple of years ago. But I think this is the first time we get to actually have a real conversation and not just a fleeting one between events, right?
Right. I was running everywhere.
Right. And I think when I first met you, you were competing in the container wars that year. Was that right?
Yes, that was so much fun. We actually just repeated that event this year. So that was a fun experience.
Yeah, Allison was the reigning queen last year, and this year we kind of tied.
It was more of
She
a
beat
tie.
me by like 2 or 3 decibels because they measure by the cheers.
Oh, very nice. Now that was my question. Were you competing against each other, or that was how it went?
McManus versus McManus. It was a good match. We had family in the audience too, so they were divided.
Oh,
it was all good. It's a really fun event.
Yeah, I know you've seen it, Christy, but if anybody listening has never seen it, there's a lot of shenanigans going on. There's tips that happen. There's giveaways, so it's a really fun time.
And basically, you have a limited time to pot up some plants. There's a whole assortment to choose from, right? And then the audience votes on whichever one looks the best.
Yeah, it's like a container gardening game show in front of a live audience.
Oh, nice.
You just explained it perfectly, like limited time. And Marianne Benetti, who's the MC, very well known up here in the Northwest. She does an awesome job, and she has a lot of fun with us.
Yeah, and she puts little parameters on the 2 contestants up there where, hold your hand behind your back. While you plant, you have to be holding something, so you can only use one hand.
Oh, man.
Hold this plant out, trade plants, there's all sorts of stuff.
Hilarious. This year was kids gardening tools were the only things we could use. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
Or you had to use those.
This year I had to hold a kid's wheelbarrow
That's right.
under my arm while I planted. So I had to take the plants out of the pots, break up the roots, stick them, dig the hole. I had to do everything one-handed with this little wheelbarrow underneath my arm.
I forgot about that. While giving to the audience about proper container gardening care.
They don't make it easy, do they?
No, they do not.
Never a moment.
It's fun.
Well, you two are known for your flower gardening experience and expertise. And so I'm curious to hear you probably were giving out really great advice during that. But let's talk about your garden and where you're located and what your whole world looks like up there. Tell us.
Absolutely. You want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, again, we, like you said, we live in the Pacific Northwest, specifically Western Washington. So we're really close to water in the Puget Sound, if anyone's familiar with that area. Our entire garden is in containers right now. So it's kind of container land, raised beds, we have a few raised beds.
We have a couple of bulbs and some minor things in the ground.
That's true.
Where we're at. So in our zoning, it was 8B, and then with the update to the USDA hardiness zones, we're now in 9A. We actually were that percentage that changed.
Yeah.
So we've been seeing that change and a little bit of warming in our climate for the last couple of years, because we weren't supposed to be able to grow a couple different plants. And the last couple of years we have been able to, with just keeping them different microclimates. And different things like Caliber
I was just thinking of that. That's definitely one that we've been able to overwinter for at least 3 years now in 2 different garden locations.
Yep, and then some false dracaenas, some cordylines that usually don't overwinter. They're grown and sold as an annual up here, and so we've been able to grow them as perennials. I mean, one of them right now is at least probably 9 feet, 9 feet tall.
It's amazing. It looks like a palm tree.
Yeah.
We planted that in the ground we're actually in a temporary garden location in my mom's yard. So it's really fun to kind of mix our gardens together just a little bit right now. And that one's in the ground, that cordyline you were just talking about. So
very cool. That's it's interesting because I've certainly watched. I'm in Los Angeles, and that's where we were 9A to begin with, and then now we're 10B. So things not this time, but over the last 25 years or 30 years that I've been growing here, it's changed that much. So I keep saying Mexico's weather is moving north, and soon we'll have summer rains, and now we do. It's kind of funny how things are changing. Yeah,
it is
really interesting.
For us up here too, maybe down in LA too, every year is just a little bit different or drastically different. Because you guys, I'm not sure about this, so I'll ask. You guys are still influenced by El Nino and La Nina, right?
That's correct. We are. We are on we're having El Nino years for the last 2, and it's been great because we've been in such a terrible drought that this has helped resolve the drought. But what we seem to flip with what's happening up in the north. You guys get dry when we're wet down here, so it's fun
to watch the news sometimes, because we'll see all the rain in your neck of the woods. You're like, hey, they're getting our rain.
Yeah, we are.
It is. And it's kind of a little known secret up here, and I guess it's been changing over the last few years, but yeah, we do actually get a lot of rain up until right around July 4th, and then it's dry until like October with occasional rains and things. But
it's like clockwork. July 5th. Dry as a bone, usually almost consistently through the whole summer. There's a few blips of rain, but not many.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Well, now I know very little about you personally. So Sean, I know you've been in horticulture for a while, but Allison, you were a middle school science teacher. So how did Spoken Garden start for the both of you?
Oh, it's such a fun question.
It is.
It started, you should start that.
Well, so I was working, a regular job up in Seattle, commuting every day. And it was basically like project management, project coordination. I was using some of my schooling and degrees, but not all of them. And I was like, I have all this information. I want to talk about it. I want to tell people about it. So I started a really fast, quick podcast on Anchor in July of 2017. And I just started talking, and I just named it real quick, Spoken Garden podcast, just generally, because I wanted to speak about gardening. And then from there, we legitimized and formalized the podcast, and then we started a blog in 2018, and just kind of kept going, and then it just snowballed from there.
Well, and how I came on is I was like you said, I was a middle school science teacher for almost 15 years, and I was just I loved my job, but I really wanted to work with Sean, and I was into gardening, but I'd never learned all the horticultural background things, and I would just kind of experiment in the backyard before we moved in together. And of course, Sean came in and we moved everything that I had planted in the wrong place. So that was a really good experience for me. And I don't know, we just got really excited about just being able to have a website and be able to blog, and it kind of, like you said, it snowballed from there. And I left my job right before COVID hit for the school districts, sadly. Well, good for me, but sad for my friends. But right after, or right in 2020 is when we officially took Spoken Garden full time. And that is the year that we started really doing video. So YouTube is actually our largest audience, and where we found that we really enjoy filming together and documenting what we're doing in the garden, and mostly in how-to format. But yeah, we just kind of, it snowballed from there, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
the same time we actually had started writing our book for Cool Springs Press that started in 2019. So it was just, everything just sort of aligned. Right.
Yeah.
Nice. I love hearing stories like this because I know a lot of people approach me and say, you know, how did you get into this? How I want to do the same thing. And so I always ask this question as a bit of inspiration for people who might want to do it themselves. So thanks for answering that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Sure. Now it's May, it's spring. So what should people be thinking about when it comes to flowers right now?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, up in our area, we still have our bulbs growing. You know, the fall planted spring flowering bulbs. They're still up and going. Definitely the alliums, different tulip species, and so something you want to think about this time of year with those bulbs is before they start flowering, before you start seeing the flowers develop, you can still fertilize with the liquid fertilizer if you hadn't already when you planted them before and added something into the soil. But once you start seeing that flower, don't fertilize it because you don't want to stop the cycle of the plant developing that flower and then actually blooming, because that will happen if you continue to fertilize during that time.
We are checking mulch levels kind of around our yard. We use a wood chip or arborist type mulch pretty much everywhere. We've been using it for years, and we find that it really breaks down and adds and kind of helps build the soil. So we usually like to keep it at about 2 to 4 inches in all our containers and some of our raised beds that we have. So we're checking the levels of those right now and making sure that we have enough. And moving, also a really important tip is to make sure if you have mulched already, to move any mulch you have away from the crown of any plant, especially those perennials, those herbaceous perennials that are starting to grow.
Right. Those things that are popping up, they need a little clearance, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And do you have any pollinator friendly flowers that you like to recommend
Oh
or
yeah.
that you grow?
Oh
It's
yeah.
so hard to pick like favorites too.
It is, but there's so many. I mean, definitely, we love to grow zinnias, and so we started some early already. We're going to direct sow some a little bit later this month because in May up here in the Pacific Northwest, we usually don't start really direct sowing a lot of our summer flowering plants until about mid-May or after. And a good way to think about it is about Mother's Day or just a little bit after that is a good time to start planting out a lot of direct sow seeds like zinnias, but sunflowers. But also we have some perennials up here that we love to add to our garden or already have. One of them is I want to say the Tacoma.
Oh,
We have so many different kinds. But also the like fuchsia baskets.
Yes.
If you have the flowering fuchsia baskets, don't put them out and leave them out overnight until after Mother's Day, because the same thing. It's just those cooler night temps, it'll just devastate them and hurt them later on.
And those are both such great pollinator friendly plants. One thing, we pretty much pack as many flowers and flowering things that we can in our yard. And one of our favorite, I don't know if we could pick a favorite, but it's kind of a funny one. It's like picking by shape. So we love flowers that have tubular shapes because we love attracting hummingbirds. So that's something that we always look for. We have a lot of salvia that we grow and a lot of plants like the Tacoma you just mentioned, and a new jessamine from Proven Winners we're going to grow in our yard this year. So they all have that tubular shape that hummingbirds love so much, and that we just love watching them zip around the garden. It's so fun.
Definitely. And kind of pollinator friendly, but also just beautiful, huge flowers. Dahlias.
Oh, we love
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
love dahlias.
Yes.
And this segues me into my next question, because I know that when we were kind of fishing around for ideas for this conversation, you mentioned dahlias, and I know when I first started gardening, all I wanted to do was plant flower bulbs, hyacinth, blue poppy anemones, ranunculus. Those were like my favorite things. But then the gophers sucked them down into the tunnels, and the shininess wore off a little bit for me because I couldn't really afford to replace them.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what are some of your favorite bulbs that you recommend people grow, and how can people protect them?
Well, I would say favorites to grow, just all of them. Just pick
Any of
some,
them.
pick some that you like, the shape of the flowers, like I was saying, the shape of the flowers, the texture of the leaves, and just go out there and start doing it. We love all different kinds of bulbs.
We talk a lot about bulbs in a
yeah.
lot of different presentations because
Mhm.
we think they're fascinating.
We do. And like, so we like to grow dahlias, elephant ears. So if we're talking about spring planted bulbs, like right now, that we can plant out, definitely dahlias, elephant ears, and different lilies, different kinds of lilies this time of year in May. And so for protection, there's a couple different products out there that you can buy, but they don't get too large. They're only maybe like small baskets, maybe about 8 inches or 10 inches, just square or even circle. And so sometimes those are too small, like some of the, well, the dahlias, you need probably just one basket per one because they get so big.
Right.
So what a lot of people like to do is they'll plant the dahlias down, and then what we've done in the past is chicken wire. And
Okay.
so build a basket of chicken wire that has holes that are maybe, the spaces of the chicken wire, the spacing is maybe about an inch or even up to 3 inches, just so those roots and the bulbs themselves can still expand and grow through, but the gophers and the moles like we have can't get up into it. Because a lot of people just go over the top, and that's great for the squirrels.
Right.
Slugs.
But if you don't get the bottom, you get the gophers, you get the moles that we have, and you're right, they just suck them down, chew them all up, and then you're like later on, where's my bulbs at?
Exactly. I witnessed it happening. I watched a hyacinth just start to quiver and then go down into the hole.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
are you kidding me?
Wow.
Well, and it's so hard with those pests, right? I mean, I think another thing that Sean and I have been doing for a while too is we keep a lot of our bulbs up out of the ground in containers or raised beds or
Yeah.
smart pots, which we use a lot of smart pots for our dahlias.
But those containers and raised beds need to have a bottom to
They
them,
do, yeah.
or at least gravel, so it's not as easy for the moles or gophers to dig through. It hurts them more than anything. So
I'm
yeah.
glad you brought that up because at our old house right before we moved, you built all those raised beds that we had tons of dahlias and other bulbs in. And yeah, it was the ground cover was basically just gravel.
Mhm.
And then we had raised beds on top of that were lifted up quite a ways. So a couple layers of protection, and that worked. We never had any problems with well, the squirrels were the problem for us. They would eat the top, but not usually the dahlias.
Mm-mm.
They weren't too big. Like in our old yard, we had squirrels everywhere. So we had a problem with like tulips, and sometimes we could also maybe kind of interplant them with daffodils and try some different things, to kind of keep them a little bit away.
It's funny. I'm glad you brought up the daffodil beds in the front,
Oh,
because we had some volunteer sunflowers that came
Uh-huh.
up, and they were huge, like the stalks. I'm not kidding you. They
Oh,
were probably about 5 or 6 inches around. They were huge at the base. Well, they got so tall and so big, and their heads got so big. The squirrels, those were so strong of a stem. The squirrels went right up and just started eating
yeah.
the top of the flower. It wasn't even done flowering yet. And they're
Yep.
just every day, just a little chunk. It was really fun to see.
It was kind of a sacrificial sunflower. So we're like, well, we didn't plant it anyway. So
Yep, that happens here all the time. I plant sunflowers and hope for the best, but I've even taken a paper because I had a sunflower that was like 12 inches in diameter, and I thought,
Oh.
I've got to protect this for the seeds. And I put a paper, like a grocery paper bag over the top. And I look, I went away for maybe half an hour and I looked outside and the whole bag had been torn off and the squirrels were already chewing it. I thought, okay, well, this is just not for me. This is for them.
Tenacious.
Yeah, they are. And around here, I think there's a part of an area of Los Angeles where squirrels are the unofficial mascot. They're just everywhere and it's really hard to keep them at bay. And everyone does their best to try, whether it's dog hair in a little mesh bag tied in the trees or bird netting over clusters of fruit. My brother uses old strawberry clam shells that you buy strawberries from the market. He clamps those around his pomegranates, and that seems to work until they figure out how to chew through the stem and drop the whole thing to the ground. They're really tenacious. It's a crazy thing. All right, so let's talk a minute about your invention that I mentioned at the top of the show. What is the little dibby and how do people use it?
We love our well, we have two actually. There's the little dibby and the Dibby XL.
Here's the little dibby.
We love this. Okay.
It's a what looks like a dowel, but it has ridges on one end, and then the other end is flat, sort of like a screwdriver, like a flathead, but it's got a dip in it. So what is this for? What do you use it for?
So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, you explained it correctly. We came up with an idea that we didn't see on the market. It's a dual purpose tool. So it's for seed sowing.
Okay.
So one end is a widger and the other end is a dibber. So you can actually, you sow your seeds, and then when you're ready to transplant, you use the widger end to carefully cradle those roots and move it. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, in the seed dibber end, it has graduated depth markings. So it goes from 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, half, and then 1/2 inch increments all the way up to 1.5 inches, depending on how deep the seed needs to be. And then you get more accuracy in your seed depth, which helps with germination.
So
and,
smart. Yeah.
plant health overall. The best start you can give your seeds. And so, so that's that's the dibber end. And then, like Allison said, the widger end is for when you have those true two-pair leaves or larger, whatever you're growing at that development stage. You can just literally scoop it out, cradle it, and then put it into its new home.
Yeah, it's so we have lots of
Rainbow colors.
Bright
Oh yeah,
colors.
gotta have the colors.
We like bright, and we've heard back from a lot of our customers. They appreciate the brightness because they can find their tools in the garden.
Yeah.
We lose things all the time. So bright pink, orange, yellow, blue, and bright green. And our goal with this is we really wanted to create this to help, like you said, to help gardeners and be accurate and feel good about what they're sowing and be able to save those seeds so they don't lose them to poor or incorrect planting depths, like you said. And our main goal is to make as many of these, get these in as many hands as we can, because we want to start making these out of recycled plastic. That has always been our goal, to reuse and repurpose that. Right now it's a very expensive process, and this is a new tool. It's only been on the market for, let's see, the little Divi is going to have its third birthday.
Yeah, third birthday.
And the Divi XL is about 1.5 years old, so it's still pretty new.
And you won an award with this tool, didn't you?
Yeah, the National Garden Bureau's 2023 Green Thumb Award.
Yeah, for the Divi XL.
Yeah, we're really excited.
So that was such a wonderful surprise, and just
very honored.
We were very honored.
That is so exciting. I mean, to go through, I know the process of manufacturing something is not easy, and it's harrowing at best if you know what you're doing. And so to be rewarded for that and have a product that's actually, being well received by the market is such a good thing. Thanks for doing that.
We feel so honored whenever people tell us that it's so helpful for them, or they post it on Instagram or whatnot. So right now you can find them on Etsy and Amazon. We just launched an Amazon store a few months ago, so that's kind of a new marketplace for us.
Very cool. All right. Well, we'll put links to that in the show notes so everyone can go there. Well, it is tip time, my favorite part. Do you have a favorite tip, each of you, that you'd like to share with the Garden Nerd audience?
So one of our tips is related to dahlias, because we love dahlias and we plant lots of them. So we want to share with your audience a really important tip. When you first plant your dahlias, make sure that you do not water them. You want to wait until you see those first sprouts of green coming up out of the soil. Whether you start them indoors or you plant them directly in the ground, don't water them yet. I know it gets really, we get so anxious and want to think that water is actually helping, but too much water can actually rot the bulb, and then it'll never come up. So make sure you wait to water until you see green sprouting out of the ground.
And what's your timing for planting dahlias?
Up here, it's about this time of year, maybe mid-May.
Yeah.
So maybe waiting a couple more weeks. But yeah, it's just that temperature, that night temperature and the soil temperature. It has to be a little bit higher than just the beginning of the month in May to actually get them to grow, and to make sure that they're not going to rot, because we still get a lot of rain that time of year. So if you plant them early and they're not covered, or they're not inside, and they get that just natural rain, they will rot if they're not actively growing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because usually we will start them early and then transplant them outside.
But the caveat is that we can plant them in the ground up here. We just meet the zoning, but for the hardiness. But in containers, it's a little bit different story. So because they're above the ground, so they have a lot more exposure to the elements and whatnot. So you want to just make sure that if you're doing them in containers, it's better to take them out, store them, and then bring them back out and replant them the next year.
Yeah.
So
Okay. And that's something that it's so funny how different everything is here than how it is up there. Because we usually plant our bulbs in around Thanksgiving. That's the time that we do. And then because our rainy season happens over winter, and that's when, but we don't have our frost. So then stuff starts to jump up. And that's how most of the bulbs are available around that time of year. And by spring, they're a little kind of sad looking. But I want to elaborate a little bit on, or ask you to elaborate a little bit on this digging up thing, because this is so foreign to me, because we don't have a frost, so we don't dig our bulbs out. But I think you wanted to talk about tulips a little bit, and that's something where if we plant tulips where I live, they only flower once and that's it. It never gets cold enough for them to come back year after year. So this digging up thing is the solution, is it not?
it can be, yeah. For your type of climate, for us, we have all those cold temperatures, so they get what's called a vernalization.
Yeah.
They get a cold treatment where for like up to anywhere from 6 weeks to even maybe up to 15 weeks, depending on the specific species, or like a daffodil versus a tulip, they'll get a cold treatment of anywhere from 35 to 50 degrees for a prolonged period of time. That triggers the flowering for that next year. But all this happens during the winter. And so that happens, anywhere from October into February, as long as they get that requirement. For you, you don't, like you said, you don't get that.
Yeah.
So it's easier for you guys if you want to dig them out, and then store them. And then well, before you plant them, and then before they come up in the spring, give them that 6 weeks to maybe 12 or so weeks of cold treatment in a refrigerator. You can just set your thermostat in the refrigerator, keep them in there, make sure they're not staying wet. They're relatively dry and it's dark, but give them that cold treatment for that prolonged period of time, and that'll trigger them to then flower. The other thing is too is that some tulips are only bred for only that one flush of growth every year, and then that's it, and they just kind of peter out after that. They might flower the next year, but then a lot of them don't. But there's the Darwin hybrids, and then there's the species tulips that are more perennials. So the Darwin hybrids and then the species tulips, they're both more perennial types of tulips. And so those are actually the ones that will come back year after year a lot more robustly. And as long as you meet all the requirements for the cold treatment and make sure they're in well-draining soil and they're planted in the right spot, they'll keep coming back year after year. So
Got it.
We do have another tulip tip.
Okay.
yes, more tulip tips. So tulips and so this time of year there might be some daffodils, some later flowering daffodils this time of year, at least up in our neck of the woods. Definitely some tulips right now that are still flowering. Our tip for this is once they're done flowering, you can remove the flower. That's perfectly fine, but leave the green. Don't cut it back down on the ground. Yet it still needs to photosynthesize so it can get all that light energy to then store that for the next year when it goes dormant. The other thing is that for tulips, not cutting them down, keep watering them probably about a week or so after they're done flowering and you've removed possibly the flower stem. So they do still photosynthesize, they're still healthy, getting that light energy, and you keep that going. And then about a week or two after they're done flowering, you can stop watering and trigger the dormancy.
Okay.
And so you're not overwatering them. You're being conservative with the water, and then you're helping the plant trigger that dormancy to shut down.
Got it. That sounds so easy to understand and implement. Thank you for that. These are great tips, both of you. Thank you so much. And thanks for being a guest on the Gardenerd Tip of the Week podcast.
Thanks for
so
having
happy
us.
to be here. This is great. Thank you for having us. It was really fun to learn more about your area too.
Of course. Well, now where can people find you online?
They can find us definitely at spokengarden.com. And you'll be able to find out more about the divvies there. You'll be able to find out more about us. We're also on YouTube, just Spoken Garden. We're on a couple different other platforms too.
Instagram's probably kind of our favorite. Sorry. I know. We're on Facebook as well, but Instagram's where we're pretty active.
All right, garden nerds, you'll find a link to Sean and Allison's book this week at gardenerd.com. We'll also share links to their website, podcast, YouTube channel, and the little Dibby and the other one as well, so that you can learn more about growing flowers and non-edible plants. That's it for this week. Subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. Visit us for tons of free gardening information at gardenerd.com. Special thanks to our sponsor, Heirloom Roses, for supporting this episode. You'll find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter under GardenNerd1, on Facebook as gardenerd.com, and of course, our Gardenerd YouTube channel. Happy gardening!